Hey, how's it going, guys? Welcome to our second week, or I guess you could call it the third week because we kind of started a couple weeks ago with a transition show of the rotation. I'm Kingdom Soldier. Got my buddy, kind of my podcast duo of the last year or two, IKON, also joining us. And today we're just going to kind of talk about what happened this previous week, and then we're going to give some predictions for next week. Sorry, that was my phone playing the stream. And we'll give some predictions for next week. We're going to talk about some standout players, some upsets that we saw. You notice that we're missing someone this week. Midnight is not here. We hope she feels better. She's dealing with some stuff and not feeling the best. However, she kind of dropped a prediction bomb on us and smoked me and IKON. We'll be talking about that later in the show. And she will not get to beat us next week because she's not here to do her predictions. So I think IKON, I don't know about you, but I think even though she can't predict, we should still just, if our points have us over her after this weekend, if this weekend happens, if power gets restored to Texas, I think that we should just keep going. I think us being ahead of her is fine. She can be the underdog, you know. So I kind of want to start personally with giving a take on the entire weekend. And I just want to say, first and foremost, like, bravo to the CDL. Bravo to the return of Maven and Merc. Bravo to everybody that was involved in the event this weekend. Enable coming on the show. Like, overall, I felt like this was a tournament week. Like, I watched so much Call of Duty from Thursday to Sunday. It was ridiculous. And you know, my kids are even used to me watching 3 straight days of Call of Duty when there's an event, but this was like 4 days of Call of Duty. And by the, third or fourth day, they're like, there's more matches? I was like, yeah, there's more matches. It was just such an incredible event, from the casting to the production, to the analyzing, to the breakdown. Some of the matches were really long. I don't think any of the 6 o'clock matches started before 7 o'clock on any of the days. But I really thought the event overall was just really great. And for me, Sunday felt like Championship Sunday. Like, technically, in most people's power rankings, you either had the top 4 or top 5 teams playing each other in those last 2 matches. And of course, the Optic Phase match delivered just over the top. So IKON, what were your thoughts on just the weekend overall, and just like kind of what were some of your takeaways?
Yeah. So welcome in, everyone. Hope you're having a good night so far. I will say, Kingdom, I don't know why you even had to bring the predictions up. We could have just let it go. We didn't have to talk about it, but you got to make us look bad. So for what it's worth, Ashley got some more points because she's a homer and she picked Minnesota in that upset over Dallas. But hey, it worked out. It was a good pick. But yeah, the first tournament was great. There were upsets all over the place, which is why our predictions probably weren't really where we wanted them to be. I agree with the fact that Sunday did seem a little bit like it was the end of a tournament weekend. I think it probably played out that way because you had 4 of what most would consider the top 5 teams in the last 2 matches. And I'm sure that was scheduled that way for a reason, but viewership was super high all the way from that very first matchup on Thursday, where ROKKR unfortunately dropped that match to Ellie Thieves. I think viewership there was at like 75K, 80K. Yeah. And then in that Optic and Phase match, it was like 110, 115K. So viewership was up. That's kind of what we expected with the influx of Nadeshot and 100 Thieves and that brand, and just kind of the storylines that are all over the place. Of course, we have Treyarch and 4v4, and all of that comes into play also. But overall, I thought that the production was where it needed to be. Of course, you had the jokes with Lando with the big hands, and they had to settle all that stuff out. But eventually they got it to where it needed to be. But yeah, I just right. Yeah. Put your hands behind your back. You'll be all right. But I think they got it to where it needed to be. I think if you go back to last year, that opening kickoff weekend, it was just, there were so many new toys. It felt like, they had like the third person and just kind of the stationary cams around the maps. And they were just trying to figure out how to use everything. So last year, the start of the CDL, it did take a couple weeks, if not a month, to really get to where that production side needed to be. But this weekend, it was great. I mean, you could tell what was going on. Of course, 4v4 versus 5v5 helps that with people spawning where they should be and knowing where the action is going to be at and stuff like that. But overall, it was just a super seamless weekend. Some of the matches went a little bit longer, but that's just what happens when you go to map 5s and you have a bunch of late search and destroy rounds and stuff like that. So overall, it was a pleasure to watch, and I'm excited to talk about some of the upsets, some of the bigger wins, and who might not have had the best weekend, and power rankings and more predictions and all over the place. So I'm ready to get going, man.
Yeah, it was all over a great week. It showed us a lot, but I would say that I think, and maybe we'll see throughout the show, I think that there might be more questions now. Like when you're trying to decide power rankings and what's going to happen over these next 2 weeks, which are vitally important in terms of like seeding for the majors, like, and who's going to be top 3 in their group and who's going to be bottom 3. You can almost predict some of them right now, but because of some of those kind of unexpected losses, it's all over the place. And one of them for me was one that all 3 of us predicted that the ROKKR were going to beat the Thieves. And I don't show what our map counts were. I don't think we predicted map counts for that one, but we were all wrong. And the LA Thieves came out 3-1 over the ROKKR. And for me, that was one of my upsets. I honestly, I thought that the LA Thieves had it in them. They've always had the potential, but I really saw the ROKKR coming out and getting a win there based on the fact that they had to play Dallas later and not wanting to go 0-2. And of course that didn't happen. But anticipating that Dallas match, I thought that the ROKKR were going to show up in a different way than they did. Was that an upset for you? And kind of what do you think happened in that match that got the Thieves the W?
I think it's funny because I think both of us actually predicted Minnesota's matches incorrectly. They're 2 matches we both got wrong.
We did.
But coming out, so all that we really had to go off of is how teams were playing in scrims, and you really only get to look at them maybe once every 5 days if they happen to play Optic on stream. So you don't really have too much of an idea, or at least a sense of how do they play on Garrison, or how do they play on Moscow, or what's happening in Control with these guys. Like you don't have too much to pull from. So the only thing that we could really look at going into this is the fact that we had kickoff weekend and Minnesota looked insane in search and destroy, and they were able to clutch up and win that battle of the North against Toronto. And LA Thieves came out that kickoff weekend and didn't even look like they were a CDL team against Optic. I mean, they got absolutely smacked. Yeah. So going into Thursday and then, like our podcast where we made these predictions, just kind of figured that maybe at this point in time, Minnesota's ahead of the game. And that did prove to be true in search and destroy. Respawns aren't quite where they want to be yet, specifically in hard points. And it's not even that they're that far behind. It's not like they were losing hard points, except for that first one on Checkmate that had to be restarted, where everybody was like, whoa, what the heck's going on here?
Yeah, right.
Yeah. So once that was restarted, they were one set of team kills away from winning the first Checkmate hardpoint against Dallas. So it's not even that they're that far behind. It's just sometimes you have 8 of the best players in the world in the same lobby, and somebody clutches up and somebody doesn't, and that ends up being the deciding factor in who wins a map. Right. So that first matchup, they came out. Minnesota did win the search and destroy. I mean, they've looked by far, it's not even close, the best search team. Then maybe a little bit later on, we'll talk about the Dallas matchup. But I do think it's a good start for LA Thieves. I think if they come out and they lose that matchup, then who knows what happens in the matchup with New York. If they go 0-2, that's a roster that I don't want to say would melt down, but I think they're kind of in a similar scenario of Seattle, where when they build chemistry, when they build team morale, that's when they can be really nasty. And I think that the win over Minnesota and the 3-0 win over New York, even though that win over New York was pretty close, they won the hardpoint by like 6. Yeah. The search was like 6-5, and then they won by 1 control round. So
very close, yeah.
Yeah, it was like a total of 8 points across the 3 maps that they ended up winning by. But still, they came out, they took care of business, they got the 20 CDL points, and now all of a sudden they're in a good position to start in the winner's bracket of the first major. So overall, I mean, the storylines are everywhere, but I thought Minnesota played well. I thought LA Thieves played well, and there's a whole bunch of other teams we could talk about too.
Yeah, the Thieves, they play against Seattle this upcoming week, and we'll talk about that match. But if they catch a W there, go into the final week 3-0, they'll be, I think, at that point, probably the only team that's undefeated, almost basically guaranteeing themselves a top 3 position in their group going into that winner's bracket. Honestly, after what happened in the opener and the kickoff, I didn't see that happening. I thought that they would fight for position, but that they would land near the top. But they didn't. And the ROKKR, regarding that match, like you had mentioned, the ROKKR are 0-4 in hardpoint, and some of them are close. But they're 3-0 in search and destroy. And everybody says search and destroy wins championships. Well, when you go up against a team that takes you to that map 5, that's where that statement comes to fruition, and it did against Dallas. But against the Thieves, they couldn't get them to map 5, and so they weren't able to kind of show their search and destroy prowess. And I just thought that the Thieves were more clutch this weekend. They were clutch in the respawn modes. They were clutch in some of the S&Ds. I think Kenny was top 3 S&D at or right now in the season, he's top 3 S&D with a 1.69. And so that match was definitely an upset, I think. But I'm pretty sure if we go back and watch the tape, both of us said it can go either way. If the Thieves show up, and you always talk about Kenny and TJ, if they deliver, that's a very hard team to beat. I 100% agree with you. If those two guys are running around the map and being nuisances as they can be, making those clutch plays, they're a hard team to stop and very unpredictable. So the next 3 matches were basically went as scheduled. I don't think anybody predicted any of these wrong, whether it's us or any other casters or commentators or podcast hosts. And that's no shade to the teams that got beat, but we had a 3-0 with Dallas over Seattle. We had a 3-0 with Optic over Paris, and we had a 3-0 with the Atlanta FaZe over Lag. Did you expect any more out of Seattle, Paris, or LAG in any of those matches, or was this kind of just by the book?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know about map count, but I think we were probably all pretty close to 3-0. I just think that some teams aren't there yet, and Dallas, Chicago, Atlanta, there's a couple other that we can probably throw in there after this weekend, but those 3 specifically just seem like they're so far ahead of the game. And it's kind of the story for like Optic, for example. It seems like every single COD title, Optic is ahead of the game for the first couple months,
right?
And then who knows what happens with the grind and the practice schedule and whatever, but teams do start to catch up eventually. There's really only been one season where that really hasn't happened, and that was back during the Dynasty team for Optic. But yeah, this weekend, I mean, the rest of the matches there, Thursday and Friday, I think they went just kind of how we expected them to go. Dallas came out, we're on fire. Huke was absolutely unbelievable. Huke was the best player in the world this weekend. What can you say about that guy? And you look at the stats, I think he had like a 1.4 across the entire weekend. But yeah. Shotzi, you have Illy, and Krim. Krim actually struggled quite a bit in that matchup against Minnesota. He absolutely lost that AR matchup with accuracy. So that was a little bit rough, and I'm sure there's nobody in the league that would take that harder than he will. I'm sure he's grinding. I'm sure he's practicing. Right. I'm sure he's watching VODs. I'm sure he's trying to fix whatever went wrong in that matchup. But the other 2 matches, I mean, Optic over Paris 3-0, Atlanta over LAG 3-0. Now, I will say when we got to Sunday, or when we got to Saturday and Sunday, that's when things got interesting. So just right off the bat with Saturday, and I don't think it's an upset by any means, but in that first matchup with LAG and Paris, I wanted to see like who's going to take a little bit of a step forward. Like there were a lot of unknowns with both of those squads. Paris came together a little bit late. They don't have a ton of chemistry. They haven't played together a ton in the past. So what was going to happen? Was just Paris's raw gun skill going to take over, or would the fact that LAG roster has played together before, has essentially minus Vivid, won a world championship before, and that ended up being what happened, is that LAG was just a squad that had played together, had better chemistry, had probably a little bit better momentum, especially towards the end of that matchup. And I think it's a good victory for them. I think after coming out on Friday and getting smoked by Atlanta, I think them turning it around, I thought
Right.
Silly played well. I thought Assault played well. Across the board, I mean, they did what they had to do in that first Saturday matchup. And then, I mean, I'll give you a minute to speak on it, but after that, we had Toronto and Florida, and that one kind of floored me a little bit.
Well, and here's the thing. That group in general, like, if you're Paris or LAG, you lose, and we talked about this last week. I think I mentioned it. Whoever was catching 2 L's, whoever was going to be 0-2, Paris has to dig their way out of a deep hole with a group that has FaZe in it, Toronto in it, Chicago in it, and Florida in it, who got upset as well. So you now have this, who's going to be top 3 in that group? It could be FaZe, Ultra, and Optic Chicago, and I don't think going into this, I don't know about you, I think all of us would have said the top 3 for Group B was going to be the Atlanta FaZe, Optic Chicago, and the Florida Mutineers. Like, that was the prediction based on how FaZe took out, or how Florida took out FaZe at the kickoff, and how they've looked in scrims, how they looked preseason last year, this year, and they won, I think, 3 tournaments last year. And so I think that these 2 matches that we're talking about right now kind of shook things up in a way where it's unpredictable what's going to happen in Group B. I still think that Chicago and FaZe are head above the other teams in this group, and there's no reason why Chicago should stay in the top 3. I think they face their toughest opponent in the Atlanta FaZe, and facing Toronto and LAG this upcoming week. If they get W's there, they'll land themselves in second place probably in that group. But you never know, because if Toronto can steal a win like they did over Florida, if they can steal a win over Chicago with some great S&D play and just some consistency, and we saw Chicago struggle in that game mode, in a way that will probably never happen again, going 12-1 versus a team. Like, I don't think I've seen any team do that. Maybe somebody needs to pull up that stat, but I don't know if that's ever happened before. And so for me, I want to look at our predictions and see who we each said in that Paris versus Lag match. So Ashley said it was going to be Gorillas 3-2, and me and you said it was going to be Legion 3-2. That's one of the places where she beat us. And then in the next
we got to
match,
bring this up, dude?
In the next match, we all were wrong, and we said Mutineers 3-1, and I said 3-2 Mutineers. So I gave Ultra some play, but I remember saying last week when we were doing that prediction, I said if the Ultra can get it to a game 5, they can win, but they didn't even need to get it to a game 5. Talk a little bit about the Toronto Ultra and what you thought gave them that W. I watched your videos today when you're recapping, and you talked about Cammy and Kleenex and their abilities on the map.
Yeah, that was the biggest story. So again, we had limited information based off of making these predictions of what we saw in terms of like actual map play. So going back to the Kickoff Classic in Toronto's matchup against Minnesota, Bance looked extremely well, and Cammy and Kleenex were negative basically on every single map. And going into this year, I just kind of figured like those 2 ended Modern Warfare so well that they're going to be the 2 that end up carrying Toronto throughout the season. Not that Methods and Bance are bad, but just those 2 are so good, especially in Search and Destroy. And I wasn't sure if we were going to continue to see that. And then in this matchup against a Skies, who's definitely going to be an MVP candidate. Skies is just nasty, even though he didn't have the best weekend, but consistently, I mean, for the most part, Skies is insane. And Neptune played extremely well on the kickoff weekend against Atlanta in one of the biggest spots that you could have been in that Kickoff Classic. So going into that matchup, you have Awakening, you have Skies, you have Neptune, who were all frying against Atlanta FaZe. You just kind of figure that they would have continued that against a team like Toronto, and it didn't happen. And I think you have to give them credit. Even Methods, I think Methods had like the 8th highest overall KD across all game modes this weekend. And that's just not something that you really expect to see. So Methods came out, played super well. Not that I'm not saying he's a bad player. I'm saying I don't always expect him to play like an Arcides or, like a top 1 or 2 AR.
Right.
But he played great. Cammy and Kleenex were just, and that's what they did last year too. You saw so many highlight plays, especially when they won their home series towards the end of the Modern Warfare season. Those two are just getting 2 pieces and 3 pieces and hard points left and right, winning rotations and hill time. So I thought that was the biggest thing. And now when it comes to like power rankings, I don't know what to do like after the top 3. And we'll talk about that a little bit later, but you have the top 3. And then where do you put kind of like the next 4 that are in that jumble? It's just, it's so jumbled up right now.
Mix them in together. Yeah.
It's like, as of right now, we haven't played enough matches to know like, okay, this team's probably 4, this team's probably 5, whatever. I think we'll get there, but Toronto came out, they looked fantastic. And now I'm confused on where to put them too.
So if you guys can hear the rain, there's like a flash storm that just showed up outside. If you can't, awesome, because it'll just be a pleasant sound for the background for me. So even though the Ultra only played 1 match this weekend, them, Empire, and Thieves are all undefeated in hardpoint. And I think if the Ultra can keep that type of, that's what helped them win, of course, and not go to a game 5 against Florida, which I wouldn't have predicted that. I would not have predicted that the Ultra were going to win both of the hard points against Florida. I thought that they would have to take them to a game 5 in order to win. But if they can keep that kind of fire going and play well in S&D, which is, a mode that, of course, something that Methods has always been good at. And so they're going to have strategy and things like that. I think this team could be a lot scarier than we think. If Cammy and Kleenex keep showing up on the map like that. The next match, the Thieves versus New York, this was one where I honestly had no idea how to predict this match. Because if I'm blatantly honest, I wanted to see a victory for the Subliners. With everything they've gone through, with everything Clay has gone through, watching his former team get rings, and I was really happy that when they announced that the Empire were the former champions and they all showed their rings off and all that kind of stuff, that they put Clayster on the graphic when they said that they were the former champions. Like, I didn't want to see a graphic that just had the 4 of them on it, because it wasn't only the 4 of them that won last year. And so it was good to see Clayster on the graphic. But he has a chip on his shoulder that is fine, and he deserves to have it, because this is the second time that this has happened to this guy, where he wins a world championship and then he gets dropped from the team immediately after. And so I think that with what Clay had to prove, with how hard he obviously worked, I think he was, I don't even remember, was he top 4 or 5 for overall KD for this weekend? Like, Clay was playing really well. The maps were really, really close. And again, I chalked it up, for me, it was the Thieves being clutch. It was just, they had a clutch factor that I don't think could be stopped. So, of course, I said Subliners 3-2. You guys said Thieves 3-1 and Thieves 3-0. So I lost that one. But I really thought that, I thought that New York looked good, in my opinion. I can't say that they looked bad. With the switching of players, I believe that they changed roles for 2 of their players on the team. Like, I thought that they did a really good job, that they were actually ready. It just came down to clutching and maybe some better communication from the long-term experience of the players on the Thieves that they have together, some of them playing together last year and things like that. And I thought that that was mostly what got the Thieves the W. Of course, like I said earlier, they have not lost a hard point. And I don't know about you, but I feel like this game is very momentum-based. The only non-momentum victory I really saw, in my opinion, was the ROKKR over Dallas. Like, the momentum did not work in Dallas's favor, winning that 4th map. And so, in my opinion, like, I think that New York is going to be okay. It'll be interesting when we do our predictions for next week, what I say, because they're going up against London and I think they have to get one of those wins. They can't go 0-3 into the final week. if you want to speak on that match a little bit, like what you saw, and then we can close out by talking about the Sunday matches.
Yeah, I mean, if you're New York, you come out, you announce your squad, the first weekend of the season rolls around and you've only got 2 of your 4 players that you originally announced. So I think that's the biggest reason why I just didn't expect much out of them, at least this weekend. And I said when we made those predictions that if you go ahead 2 or 3 months from now, you might be picking New York in a different spot, because that's what Clay brings to the table.
Right.
Is he just has that ability to bring his teammates together and figure out. I mean, you could see after that loss, he was heated. He was going on a rant for like 25 seconds. Just, I don't know who he was getting into or what it was about, but somebody messed up and he was going to let him know. But that's what he brings to the table with leadership quality. And I feel like when you've got these young guys that are really, I mean, look at that squad. Diamond Khan, so he's making his debut. Asim played last year for Minnesota, of course, but Mac was a rookie last year. So again, he's in this scenario where he's got these younger players that he's really teaching the game to, not teaching the game, but like teaching the ins and outs of the game. And that's what he has the ability to do. So I think that's kind of where I expected them to be as of right now with all the turmoil that they've gone through. But give it a couple months, they'll be right there in the middle of the pack where everybody expects them to be, or where they expect a Clayster-led team to be. And you did talk about a win based off of not having momentum. And that's how I feel about the first matchup on Sunday. So Seattle was able to get that victory over London, which was the first matchup on Sunday.
Right.
And I just thought Seattle came out. They looked fantastic. Gunless looked like the best flex in the entire league. Octane was also playing really well. They were up 2-0. And then it goes to Control, and they lose 3-1. Then it goes to the next hard point, and they get smoked 250 to 115. And you're thinking, oh boy, here comes Raid S&D. And thank goodness we get to watch some Raid S&D, because I could watch it all day.
Yeah.
But they just clutch up. I mean, that's a map where those lines of sight are pretty long, right? You have choke points on the top, bottom, and middle of the map that are, if you're an SMG and you run through zigzag, if there's somebody in kitchen, you might have a tough time winning that gun battle or getting down underneath into P5.
Yeah.
So Raid S&D is just an opportunity for Octane and Gunless to really show up and lead that squad to a victory, and they were able to do it. So I think it's good for them. I think that this is a matchup that they had to win. If they lose this, I mean, it's probably one that most people would expect. Okay, Seattle versus London, here's a chance for them to get a victory and get some points and maybe not start in the losers bracket of that first major. So they made it happen. It wasn't the prettiest, but they did clutch up in search, and it was a big victory for them.
Seattle had to win. They were one of these teams that plays 2 matches. They played 2 matches last weekend. They played 2 matches this weekend. This upcoming weekend, they faced the ROKKR and the Ellie Thieves. Like, if they didn't get a W versus London, they could honestly be looking at an 0-4 hole going into the last week with 1 match left. Like, and you pretty much just accept losers bracket at that point. And so now they have a chance. If they can pull another, I wouldn't call that an upset, but if they can pull an upset in this weekend, you know, they can maybe go into it with a 3-2 or something like that. And so I, like, honestly, I was pleasantly, I thought that London actually played well for being a new team, being newly formed. I thought Parasite's ace was perfect. To watch Parasite get an ace on Raid in 2021, bananas. Like, this guy won a championship when that map was first invented and put into the cycle. He was on a team that won 4 in a row, including champs, and with Killa and Mir and Karma, you know, and these names that have been storied, you know, for time to come. And I believe Mir is still playing in challengers. I don't know if Killa is playing in challengers, but of course Karma just got picked up again by Optic, and he's helping with analyzing some of their gameplay, but also being a content creator. Like, these are names that we'll always remember, because that champs was special. That Black Ops 2 champs it did something for the entire Call of Duty community. And to see Parasite back on the sticks doing his thing, and the way that they took that L in the hard point, which they should have won. Like, I thought they could have won that first hard point. I honestly was like, I wouldn't say should have won, but they could have won. And they just kind of gave it away. And seeing him and the team stay and bring it to a map 5, like I mean, if I'm a coach or if I'm an owner of London, I am in no way disappointed with that. Now, if they had 0 on the team, in your opinion, do they catch a W in that match?
No, probably not. I don't think it makes much of a difference.
Exactly. And that's like what Ashley said last week, is she was like, very similar players when you replace them with each other. Like, you're not giving them a guaranteed win by putting 0 on the team instead of Parasite. And I thought Chris played really well. Yay to Seattle for showing up and clutching up. Those guys, for them to be able to smile at the end of a match, it's been a long time coming. Like, honestly, that was like, you got smoked by Dallas, and I listened to Octane's review of it, and he was like, yeah, we just got beat. Like, those guys are really good. It's hard to pick up maps off of them, and we tried, but they just beat us, and honestly, that's what happened. But when it came to the London match, they had to clutch up. They had to use their team communication. And last week I talked about the vibes that Seattle needed to come with, and that the vibes that they were creating, playing Warzone tournaments together and all that helps in those moments. It didn't help Chicago at the end of this in their searches, but it definitely, I think, helped Seattle. All right, so these next 2 matches, the big matches of the weekend, we'll get through these kind of quickly, I guess. But the upset of the weekend, according to Ashley, bravo. She got all the points. She really beat you and I. We both said 3-2, though. We didn't count the ROKKR out. We both said that they could win it. But honestly, I mean, if I'm honest, I thought that even if they got to a map 5, that Dallas would ice up. That the Dallas that won tournaments last year, that won champs, I thought that that ice would come through. I thought that they would do a good job. I thought that they would get this W. But Minnesota was just like, nope. These searches are ours. We're undefeated in search and destroy. And that's what, in my opinion, won them this match, was that and the way that they stole the control. I think, because didn't they have to win an offense in order to win it?
They actually
won
came
an
out
offensive round, right?
They won the first 2 rounds. They won their first offense and their first defense.
Right. And that puts you on your heels. Like, when you win the first 2 rounds, you put the other team in an awkward position where they start playing for round 5, and so they're thinking about their lives, and, like, accuracy was accurate, all pun intended. And I think overall for the season, he's 6th with a 1.53 S&D KD. Like, and everybody was saying in predictions, like, that it was going to be Priesta and Attach and Major Maniac that were going to carry them in S&D, and accuracy just came out, and Lamar was like, okay, we'll see. And he just made the right plays at the right time. He was frying. He didn't give people a chance to get into their setups and search and stuff like that. And so I would say big ups to the ROKKR. Great job. Like, that was a W that was absolutely needed going into week 2 and week 3. And now, Minnesota has a phenomenal chance to be in the top 3 for their group going into that winner's bracket in the major. What was your thoughts on that match?
Yeah, so we did actually do a co-stream of this match. So if you missed it, you can go watch it, or the next one coming up. We'll be live here on Minnesota's YouTube channel doing a co-stream of the upcoming matches. But that match overall, the first one, and I want to make sure that we make this point clear, the checkmate hardpoint, Minnesota had, if they win 1 team kill as it rotates over towards P1 and eventually P2 on the 3rd set of rotations, if they get 1 team kill, they win that map 1. So it's not like that hard point on checkmate. It's not like they lost 250 to 115 and got blown out. I mean, yes, Dallas is nasty. Shotzi, Illy, Hugh at the SMG positions on a map like this, it's really hard to take a hard point off of them. But they were 1 team kill away from winning that hard point. So even though it was a 3-2 and it seems like it's really close, I mean, they had an opportunity to shut this one down even earlier than that. And then it went to the S&D on Moscow 6-3. That really wasn't all that close at all. And it just seems like every time somebody needed to clutch up, Attach was getting a 2-piece at the end of a round to steal around. And Major Maniac was making plays around the map. That's the thing with Minnesota, is that each one of these players have the ability to just pop off, get a 2-piece in search. They're in a spot you don't expect them to be. And in 4v4, a 2-piece like that probably wins you a round. And if you do
Right.
that a couple times, you probably win the map. So just I mean, you could say so much about them in Search and Destroy, but the fact that they have that clutch gene really helps. It went to the control on Garrison, and this is where it starts. And I know we've talked a little bit about are pros loving control? Are they not really liking control? I will say, so the first defense and the first offense that Minnesota came out and won, the reason why I don't love control, especially on Garrison, is because you have two teams that are on, opposite sides of the map. They come together, they get to the middle of the map, and there's a team gunfight. And if you win that team gunfight on Garrison, you're probably going to take B, or at least get really close to taking that B point.
Right.
And if you lose that team gunfight, now you're going to be spawn trapped, and it's super tough to get out of your spawn if you're on offense to get back into, trying to capture a point. So that's what happened in the first two rounds, is that Dallas came out. They didn't win either of those on the first two rounds. They were quickly down 0-2. Then they started to get back into it. But Minnesota won those first two control rounds by so much that they had the life advantage. They win they get the defense on that fifth round. They clutch up. They take the control. The hard point on Garrison was, even though the score was exactly the same, 250 to 201, it wasn't quite as close as the checkmate was.
Right.
Then the SND to close it out. I mean, we said it earlier, attached, hitting a flank through top green, gets a 2-piece as Dallas is trying to plant, wins a round. Accuracy was almost in the same exact position. He's in bottom green. He looks up. Two people are standing right in front of him. He gets a 2-piece. They win the round. They have a unique ability to clutch up, and it was a massive spot for Minnesota to be in. And now all of a sudden, if you look at their group overall, it's like they've already played the two toughest teams in their group. So moving forward, you've got to think that Minnesota gets a spot in the winner's bracket heading into the first major.
You think so? That would definitely be the prediction. Although I think New York is a must-win for when they play them. They're our last match on Sunday next week, and then I think also. I think Seattle is going to show up. I think they're going to give them a run for their money. It really depends on, like, maps and modes have so much, like Moscow. You talked about Moscow Search and Destroy. Like, the interesting stat, like 100% of offenses, the team that was on offense got first blood 100% of the time on Moscow Search and Destroy. And with the questions that, like, people have been talking about, and we can talk about it now real quick. Like, for me, I like control. Maybe it's because I didn't like domination so much that was the biggest topic of the opening last year, was how much everybody hated domination, couldn't keep up with it, couldn't follow it. They didn't and the changes they made in control, where they changed it to remaining lives, like, instead of remaining respawns, like that made it easier to follow. The casters did a great job of telling us what was going on. Yes, when it got obvious sometimes that teams were just holding for that round 5, they didn't want to lose lives. Like, and that, that can be less entertaining, but still, we're talking about a couple minutes or a minute or 45 seconds or 30 seconds of wait time, rather than, like, knowing that a domination is over for 2 minutes, and so
right.
In my opinion, is it the same? I think I saw Octane talked about that Specialist was what made control so hype in Black Ops 4. It's not the same game, so it's not going to play the exact same. I think we do need maybe a different map or two within the rotation. I know some people have complained about, like, Checkmate. I think it has like a 90% win percentage when you're on defense in Checkmate, and so that's way too predictable. When only 11% of the time the offensive team is winning on Checkmate, like, it's kind of, you almost don't need to watch. You can just wait and be like, okay, oh, yep, they won. And so there was a lot of setups. There's spawn trapping similar to what you would see in CTF, which a lot of people are saying they want in this game. I saw a lot of pro players. I saw Aches. I saw Sensor. I think Methods talked about putting uplink in this game, which I don't know how you would do that in a boots on the ground game, but
It'd be dope, though.
Lion Man had a ramp on Miami that you could run up and jump off of and dunk the basketball.
Put ATVs in.
Oh gosh, make it Halo, yeah. But overall, this was a great match leading into what felt like the championship, the juggernaut match of the weekend. And other pro players were saying how good the Atlanta FaZe versus Optic Chicago match was. That was just, even though there were two of the maps that were just obviously one-sided, it still felt like a ridiculously competitive series. And I don't think it meant anything bad about Optic's S&D. I mean, you may have a different opinion on this. FaZe came out and just played so freaking well. Optic may have been put on their heels to a point where they didn't, and FaZe did that so much even last year. They put teams on their heels, and you see, Simp getting a couple snipes and stuff like that. Oh, I wish we had snipers. But you see some of that stuff happening, and you really feel bad for the other team. You're like, okay, how, because it's not just that you're down 3-0 or 3-1. It's that you're down 3-0 or 3-1, and one of their players is 6-1 or 6-2, and it's just almost like everybody's just watching to see what that player does. And this was, I think it was on the Miami. Yeah, Seth went 0-6, I think, with 800 damage, which I believe we will never, ever see him do again. I was waiting for there to be some kind of a ping problem or stick drift or something was going on that caused that. But it was just, that map is really interesting to play on. And if you get the right setup, you win the game. If you're watching the cross or watching mid and watching the cross and you're flanking around and, the bomb sites, if people are trying to plant at A, it's kind of easier to cover. I actually thought that they were going to put up more of a fight in S&D. And I'll say it for what it's worth. The second hard point, I think Optic could have won the game. I know we talked about it before we got on the show. I don't understand how Abizi got that 3-piece at the bus. He got the 2-piece, and then I thought he didn't have enough in his to get the kill on Dashy. And I think I told you, I think maybe Dashy needed to reload because he put a couple bullets in him and Dashy was frying. He's number 2 overall for the season right now with a 1.24. Dashy was playing really well in those respawns, and you called him in one of your videos the overall best player on Optic Chicago right now. And I can't really not agree with you. We all thought it was going to be Envoy. He's leading them, but Dashy has been playing really well. And I thought maybe he would get that and then and then it would be a fight for the point. But once Abizi got that 3-piece, and that was one of the top plays of the entire weekend, it was going to map 5. Optic never got close to the hard point after that. They set it up perfectly. They were able to push to both sides and just keep them from getting there. And they won that, and they went to the map 5. So I kind of want to hear your take on this match. This dog is tripping in the background, so you may see me run really quick to get it to stop. But hopefully you guys can't hear it. But I want to hear your take on, this match, this kind of epic clash of titans that we had at the end of this event.
Yeah, so I thought you hit a ton of points on this map overall. First one, so I will say for either of those hard points, either one of them could have gone either way. They were super tight. In fact, on the very first hard point, the first hard point on Garrison, it came down to, it was going to P3 on that set of rotations, and Atlanta was set up. Had Optic not pushed P2 and clutched up and gotten a couple kills inside of P2, they lose that first matchup. They didn't have rotations. They wouldn't have won those gun battles with just a few seconds left trying to rotate over towards P3. So that map 1 could have entirely went to Atlanta. And as we move on, the SNDs, of course, Kingdom talked about how they were a blowout, and I'll get to those in a second. But the map 4 which was that hard point, it was almost the same thing. If Abizi doesn't get what might have been the single most clutch play of the entire weekend, getting that 3-piece, Atlanta loses that Moscow hard point. So the 2 hard points, Optic clutched up over towards P2 to get those remaining seconds. On Moscow, Abizi clutched up, got the 3-piece. He basically led them to the final time there. And when it came to the search and destroy, there's a couple things that come into play here. So first, there are no smokes and there are no snipers. So essentially what happens in search and destroy is that you have to challenge everything. Like if you're thinking over towards, like for Miami, which was the first map, if you're pushing either of those bomb sites, if you're going to the top of the map and you're on beach and you're trying to run up on that bomb site, there's going to be somebody sitting back in top lobby. And if they're sitting up there, the only way that you can plant is to challenge that gun battle. That's not a 50-50 gun battle because they're going to be behind a heady. And if they win that gun battle, now the bomb's down. You can't push that site. And it's the same over towards the bottom part of the map by hotel, where if you push up towards top hotel and you're trying to push out towards that bomb site, you get to that staircase and you know that there's going to be barrels pointed towards you. So if you go ahead and you try to step out, it's a less than 50-50 gun battle, and that's just where search is right now. Without smokes, without snipers, you have to push through these choke points, and it's really tough to win an offense. And sometimes it pans out, and you do end up winning that gun battle, and you get a bomb down, and then you could potentially win the round. But right now, search just seems to not be in a great place. Can't use snipers, can't use smokes. That's the biggest issue. And I will say, last thing here on this match, I think Optic has to do a little bit of work with their search and destroy setups. I know from the very first offense where Atlanta took the bomb on Moscow, they go bottom of the map, they go towards that B bomb site, and there's just one gun bat. So Formal sitting inside P1 by statue, Arcides jumps out, hits him off the heady. The entire bottom portion of the map is open. And once you get bombed down inside B on Moscow, it's a super tough retake with all the corners and different places you can hide. And it just seems like you need someone at the bottom of the map. You need someone mid so that if that person does go down, there's still somebody left over there to stop that push. And it happened in the later Atlanta offense where there were 3 set up towards the bottom side of the map for Optic, and they guessed wrong. They pushed up towards top Eskies, got a trade, got bombed down, and now you have to try to retake again. It just seemed like they were really push heavy towards wherever they were putting their defense, and it just didn't work out for them. Now, if they do get the kill, you think, well, heck, that's a 400 IQ play, but it just didn't work out that way. So overall, I won't take anything away from Optic. I think they have to do a little bit of work in search and destroy, but it's early. I'm sure there's not a ton of strategies involved right now with like this push or where we're going or whatever. So I think they'll get there, but they just didn't make the clutches in this one.
Yeah, and this is another match where you and I both said that Optic was going to win 3-2, and Ashley said that, I think she said FaZe was going to win 3-1. Yes, she said that FaZe was going to win 3-1. I said Optic was going to win 3-1. You said Optic was going to win 3-2. So, big ups to Ashley and her great guesses. Just so you guys know, like right now, she has 60 points and we each have 35 based on our predictions. So
this early, give us a break.
But she did get 20 points for the upset and for she didn't call I think she might have even called the map count and predicted right for the Dallas and ROKKR match, which I literally saw every single, like, Breakpoints puts out a predictions. They've got like Sensor on there and Lineman and some other guys like Easy Mac, and they and Rab, and every single person said Dallas, and Dallas, of course, they got upset. Now this is where this gets kind of interesting, like looking at the season standings, and I don't know if you have that up, but we'll look at those real quick, and then we'll kind of run through predictions for next week before we get out of here. But so season standings wise, and this was something that last year people kept saying, because every time I got to talk about it on our podcast, on my own videos, I kept talking about how much these points matter. This is not what's that show with the improv with like Wayne Brady and
Whose line is it anyways?
Whose line is it anyway? Where everything's
Yeah.
made up and the points don't matter. The points
Yep.
do matter. Like, we're talking about seeding. You have to be top 8 to go to champs. Like, you don't get to go to playoffs unless you're top 8. So if you're a team like Paris who already is 0-2, like, you need those points. Those points do matter. And then when you get into the majors, you're getting extra and bonus points for wins and for victories. And so, in my opinion, LA Thieves having 20 points, being the only team right now in the league with 20 points, being 2-0. Now Atlanta FaZe, Dallas Empire, Optic Chicago, Toronto Ultra, all of the teams that are right below the LA Thieves, they've got some opportunities to, in my opinion, pick up some wins. But the LA Thieves having 20 points, being at the top of the leaderboard there, Nate Shot tweeted out, you love to see it or whatever. And it's great. Like, they had, I think they won in LCS, they won in COD, and there was something else that the Thieves won in last week. And so they had a really big weekend. Great job. Like, having those 20 points is going to matter later in the season. This is different than power rankings, of course. And so if you look at the standings the way they are right now, so what I'm looking at is definitely outdated. FaZe has 20 points as well. And so I think that going into this next week, I kind of have thought about some teams that, based on the point structure and everything like that, some teams that kind of have to win or have to lose, or not have to lose, have to win, have to get some W's and maybe pick up at least one map. I would say London needs to win at least one because they have the Thieves and ROKKR in their final week. And so if they don't get a W this weekend going into it, and we'll do our predictions and see what we think. But with them playing New York and Dallas, unfortunately, this week, and then they go into the Thieves and ROKKR in the last week, not winning against Seattle is going to come back to bite them. And they may be, 0-4, going into the major. And I think I said Paris needs to win because they have FaZe in Toronto in the last week. New York needs to, in my opinion, they need to win twice. They have FaZe and Optic in their final week. So NYSL needs 2 victories. And then Optic Gaming, in my opinion, I think they can get 2 wins against Toronto and Lag. And if they can, then they can still fight for that number 1 spot, depending on if FaZe wins out or not. FaZe has some more competition coming their way. And so we'll kind of see what happens. But do you have any thoughts about the standings before we do our predictions, Icon?
Yeah, I do think it's super early. The only teams that I think are in super good positions or super bad positions are the teams that are either 2-0 or 0-2. So if you're Paris, you're 0-2, you have to come out and win 3, and maybe you can get one of those lower seeds that's going to be in the winner's bracket if they win out. There's nothing to say that if you go through in 3-2, you're going to be in the winner's bracket, right? So I think Paris is kind of in a must-win scenario, or else they're going to start the first major in the loser's bracket. Whereas on the flip side of that, I think LA Thieves are in a really good spot, especially since they've already played Minnesota, who I think everybody would pretty much agree is one of the top 2 or 3 teams in that group. And Atlanta in the same spot. So Atlanta has that win over Chicago. Now, I think that group is super tough. You have Toronto there. You have Florida there. They have some stiff competition in their way. But yeah, if you're 1-0 or 1-1 or 0-1, I don't want to overreact at this point in time. Like, if you're Florida, you have 0 points, you're 0-1. You played Toronto. You still have matchups against LAG and Paris, right, and you should have some matchups there that are winnable. So I just think if you're 2-0, you're in a really good spot. If you're 0-2, you're probably not in a great spot. You're probably going to start off in loser's bracket. And if you're anywhere else, you got plenty of time to get caught up and make your moves, get into the winner's bracket so you're ready to go by the first major.
Yeah, Paris 0-2, they only play 1 match against a Florida team that is going to be charged up to get a couple of wins this weekend. And then they close out in week 3 with FaZe in Toronto. Like, it's honestly, and and it does matter when you're looking forward to matches. Maybe a coach can try to get you not to, but when you're looking forward, and is Theory the coach at Paris? Is that right?
I'm not sure off the top of my head.
I think it is Theory. I think he's the coach for Paris. I'll try to look in the chat and see if I'm right about that, but I believe that Theory is the coach for Paris, and so they haven't won an S&D yet. They're 0-3, and that it matters. When you lose your searches, like maybe that's because that game 5 mattered against Lag. They lost a search against Chicago, and then they lost another search against Lag. And when you're not winning your searches, it's going to be tough in this game unless you're powerhousing through teams. But we saw 1, 2, 3, 4 3-2s, and so 4 game 5s this weekend, and so it's almost half the matches. So let's run really quick through our predictions. And so I'll give you the match, and then you can tell me who you think is going to win and what you think the map count is going to be, and I'll do the same thing so that we can have a record. We already know we're going to beat Ashley unless she throws in her predictions offline. But we'll win for the live predictions.
We'll definitely get her predictions.
Yeah, we'll get her predictions. We'll start off, and I'll say that I believe that Florida is going to beat Lag 3-1. I believe that Chicago is going to beat Toronto 3-2. What are your predictions for those 2 matches?
Okay, so first 2 Thursday matches. I guess we can just go by day here.
Yep.
I think all of a sudden that Florida and LAG matchup is going to be a lot closer than what I thought it was going to be just a few days ago. I'm not going to pick an LAG win. I do think that Florida will bounce back. I'm going to take Florida 3-1, but I expect Awakening and Skies to return to form like they did in that Atlanta match. I just think they can't stay down for too long, so I'm going to take Florida there. And then Chicago, Toronto, man, it's almost like last week the 2 of the better matches were right towards the end. This week, it's like 2 of the better matches are right towards the top, because this matchup here with Toronto and Chicago, it's another one where
it's important.
I mean, yeah, if Cammy and Kleenex play the way that they did last week, who knows? I mean, Dashi has been arguably the second best player in the league, but this is a big spot. I'm going to take Chicago. Man, it's almost tough to call a 3-2 for Chicago, because after the performance that they had in Search against Atlanta, it's tough to imagine them clutching up in a Search to win a map over Toronto. So I'm actually going to say that the respawns are all going to go their way. I'm going to say 3-1 Chicago in that matchup on Thursday.
And that's a good prediction. Ultra hasn't lost they haven't lost an HP yet, but they've only, played 1. So, I guess they played 2 and won both of them against Florida. So that's an like that team, if they play like they did, you're right, it can be a little challenging. All right, Friday matches. We've got Minnesota ROKKR versus, so we don't even need to ask Ash's prediction on that one. Minnesota ROKKR versus the Seattle Surge. I'm going to say 3-1. I think Minnesota could even 3-0 this team. Like, Minnesota's confidence is high, but their coaching team is not going to let them get so high on confidence that they don't play right. They had something to prove against Dallas, and they proved it. They showed up. They proved it. They tweeted all the memes, all the yawns, all that kind of stuff. It started, Crim6 got involved, like all this kind of stuff with the, Dallas social team tweeting out the yawn meme for, they gave us the ROKKR, and Chicago got Atlanta. And it's like, well, no, you gave yourselves the ROKKR when you gave Atlanta to Chicago when it was being picked back in, when they did the snake draft. And so, honestly, they picked that match, and Minnesota was like, you might have wanted to take us a little more seriously. And so I think that this could be a 3-0, but I'm going to say 3-1 Minnesota. And then for London versus New York, oh man, see, if London doesn't win this match and they go up against Dallas literally the next day, so they're the last match on Friday versus New York, and the first match on Saturday versus Dallas. If they catch an L versus New York, going up against the Dallas Empire, I don't care if they lost 3-2 to Minnesota, they're still the Dallas Empire. Hook is arguably the best player on this game right now statistically, and even when they were losing, it was like this dude's getting 2 pieces and 3 pieces every time they showed him. His movement is just on point. What he does on the map is on point. Even his communication when they did listen-ins was on point. And so I can already predict that match for a W for Dallas. But up against London, I'm going to say, gosh, because I said New York needs to, I'm going to say 3-2 New York. I think New York needs to win. Whatever yelling and screaming Clay did, I think he's going to need more of that this year than he's used to. I think Clay has been able to be kind of that hype man, but I think he's going to have to lead the team like Krim, but also be Clay and gas up his teammates at the same time. He's going to have to do both, and I think he's going to figure it out. I think he is a winner, and it took 1,000 days or however long it was, but he got back on top, and I think Clay wants to get back to that form. And so I'm going to say 3-2 New York for that second match.
I like it. I think the first match, Minnesota versus Seattle, I think at best, AR and flex positions are on par with Minnesota. I think that's at best. I think Accuracy and Major Maniac have been playing phenomenal this year. So I think Gunless looked really good in the first weekend, and Octane hasn't quite been the Octane that we saw last year in MW, but I think that he can get there. But when it comes to the SMG positions with Looney and Pristini, I just don't think they're on the same plane as Priesta and Attach. I just don't think that they're there. So I think for me, that's going to be the problem throughout the entirety of the year. Even though they did look decent in that matchup against London, what are they going to do against Huke and Shotzi and Simp and Abizi and Scump and on? I mean, those are really tough matchups, and including Priesta and Attach. I just think that in a 4v4 game where you need dominant SMGs, I just don't see it. So I'm going to go 3-0 Minnesota in this first matchup on Friday. And then second matchup, New York versus London. I'm taking New York here. I think they were so close to beating an Ellie Thieves team that was on fire this weekend. They played great, especially in that first matchup against Minnesota. They were super close, just a few points here and there, and they get a nice upset victory there. I think Clay's going to have them working extremely hard throughout the entirety of this week, prepping for that match. And London, I think that, again, I think maybe they'll get there. Parasite is brand new to that squad, so they haven't had a ton of time to really gel and build chemistry and team morale and stuff like that. I'm going to take New York. I do think it'll be a 3-2, but I'm taking New York there.
New York 3-2. All right. So going into Saturday, we've got Dallas versus London, Optic Chicago versus LAG, and Atlanta FaZe versus Toronto. I'm going to say that Dallas is going to 3-0 London. I think that, Krim came out and said, I played bad. We all played bad. The team played bad. It has to be better. But they lost 3-2 to a very good Minnesota ROKKR team. Bad is, of course, losing to that team. Like when they catch an L, and I did not think that they were going to catch an L this early. I thought that they would maybe get to week 3 before they got a loss. But I really think that, unfortunately, I predicted New York to beat London, and now I'm predicting Dallas to beat London, which means London is going to go into the final week 0-3. And who did I say they had left? The Thieves and Rock. Oh man, yeah. So they have a rough, upcoming schedule. But I would say that they have the Thieves and ROKKR. It looks like, so that's going to be fun for them. But I'd say Dallas is going to 3-0 London. Chicago. This is where we're. So besides that last match, this is that same sprint like we had the first week where it was Dallas versus Seattle, Chicago versus Paris, Atlanta versus LAG, and it was 3-0, 3-0, 3-0. You could see that in the first 2 matches. You could see a 3-0 from Dallas and London. I'm going to say that Chicago is going to 3-1 LAG. I'm going to give LAG some grace there and say that they're going to pull out a map, depending on how they play Florida. And then I don't think FaZe is going to 3-0 Toronto. That is a hard match for me to call. I think if FaZe is going to catch an L, that could be where it happens. That is who does FaZe have remaining? Toronto, Paris, and New York to play. So FaZe still needs to play Paris and New York, which will probably be W's. I think if FaZe doesn't lose against Toronto, they could be undefeated. But I'm going to say that they are going to win 3-1 Atlanta over Toronto. And it's going to be momentum based. They're going to take the control, and that's a hard call, man. Like, honestly, it's a hard call. A lot of what you said about Cammy and Kleenex, like, and their just play style in general, I think they may be able to give a good fight to Simp and Abizi. But R-Cities is, I mean, one of the best ARs in the game right now. He wanted to be a main AR. He gets to be in that position, and he's playing it well. And so, but I'm still going to go, I'm going to go FaZe 3-1 against Toronto.
Okay. So first couple matchups here, I don't think there's a ton to talk about. And I will say, when you said Huke is arguably the best player, I don't really think it's close. I think he is the best player in the game right now. If you're looking at like KDs, like between 4 and 5 is like 1.19 and 1.18 KD. Between 5 and 6, 1.18, 1.17.
Right.
Huke has a 1.39. Nobody else is even close. I mean, the dude is just frying. I think, again, it's extremely early, but if the season ended today, there's no doubt about it. He's the best player. So I think this will be a quick 3-0. Dallas wins the first matchup 3-0. I think Chicago also wins 3-0. I think LAG put on a decent showing, and they won a match that they probably should have against Paris, but this is an entirely different beast. I think Chicago is too much. I think just like before, both of these two matches on Saturday will start in a 3-0, which brings us to the Saturday night matchup, Atlanta versus Toronto. This is what I'm going to pick as my upsets of the week. It's a tough spot. I think Atlanta is playing super well, but they didn't look great in the respawns against Chicago. And with that said, Toronto is also really good at search and destroy. You're not going to see 12-1 round counts for search and destroy against Toronto. It's just not going to happen.
No.
If Cammy and Kleenex play as well as they did, and if Methods is top 10 in KD, I mean, this team is legit in my opinion. So I'm going to take Toronto 3-2. That's going to be my upset of the week.
Wow. I didn't see it coming. All right. Well, you'll get your upset points if it happens. I think if Toronto beats Chicago, if Toronto somehow beats Chicago, they could beat FaZe and be number one in that group. You know, it's really like it's Toronto's game to lose. Like they really showed up against Florida, and so and I really thought it was going to be Florida, FaZe, and Optic in that group. So it'll be interesting. All right, finishing it off on Sunday. You almost could switch Saturday and Sunday match-wise, for the teams that are playing. But finishing up on Sunday, we've got Florida versus Paris. And again, I'm gonna say that Florida's gonna show up. Paris, I hate to give them an 0-3 going into the final week, but I'm gonna say that Florida is gonna win that 3-1. LA Thieves versus Seattle. I'm gonna say LA Thieves is gonna win that. Oh, gosh. If they show up like they did, and this is their only match, like they're going to get to wait till Sunday. They're going to be fired up, charged up, ready to play, excited about getting on the sticks. Kind of like what Minnesota got to do. They lost to LA Thieves on Thursday and got to wait 3 whole days to play Dallas, and they were ready for it. I'm going to say LA Thieves 3-1 as well. And then the last match, Minnesota ROKKR to finish it off. They started last week. They're finishing this upcoming week. I'm going to say Minnesota 3-1 over New York. I think Minnesota is going to prove themselves to be a dominant team. And after this week, too, I think we'll be able to really predict top 3 and bottom 3 for the most part. I think the middle will be where who's going to be third and fourth is going to be back and forth. But I think the way that this league is shaping up so far, there are some unpredictable matches, but I don't think anybody is doubting Dallas as still one of the top teams. And so we'll finish after you give your Sunday takes. We'll do a quick kind of power rankings if we can, because it is difficult with the way the matches went this first week, and it's only the second week that we're going into, or we should call it don't have power rankings. Ha, ha, ha. Shout out to all the pro players without power out now, hanging out at Zuma's house or apartment, eating pizza. I really hope they get their power back because we're not going to see any matches if they don't. They've gotten, as Hatch said, the scrims are GA'd this week, which I thought was hilarious. But we'll see what happens tomorrow if there's actually matches. I haven't seen anything from the league yet, so I think they're hoping as long as the players can play, they're going to play, even if they don't have reps or anything like that, because it's everybody except for the guys but even the guys in LA and Atlanta, and I think Florida's all over the place. Like, they can't scrim if there's no teams to play. So those are my Sunday guesses. What do you got for Sunday for predictions?
All right, first match on Sunday, Florida versus Paris. I'm still super high on Florida. I don't know if they come out and they stumble this weekend, now I'll have to start thinking a little bit differently. So this Florida versus Paris, I'm going 3-1. I do think Paris has, and again, Paris is one of those teams that a month from now, 2 months from now, maybe they're performing a little bit different. I just think it's so early in the season. They were the last squad to be put together. I just don't think they have the cohesion that a lot of these other squads do at this point in time. So Florida 3-1. That second matchup, this is another one of those trap matches. Seattle versus Ellie Thieves. I mean, it's always the question. Whenever I sit down and I think, okay, I'm going to predict a game with LA Thieves, I think, am I going to get good Kenny and TJ? Am I going to get bad Kenny and TJ? Because that determines if they're going to win or lose. And Kenny came out and was the 7th best player in terms of stats on this last weekend. So if you get that Kenny, this team can beat anybody. If you don't get a good Kenny, it all seems to ride on his shoulders for me. I do think that they probably have enough. I don't think it'll be a blowout. I'm going to go LA Thieves 3-2 in that matchup. But I think Seattle can make it interesting, especially with the way Gunless and Octane played, but specifically Gunless that first weekend. Which brings us to the marquee match on Sunday night, which is New York versus Minnesota. This is, man, again, trying to predict matches like this when LA Thieves basically kind of smoked Minnesota in that very first matchup.
Yeah.
And then New York comes back, plays super tight. Even though they lose 3-0, each one of those maps, like we talked about earlier, were super
very
tight.
Close. Yeah.
So you have two teams that, based off what we have so far, but I do feel like the thing with Minnesota, their path to victory right now, and I don't care who they're playing is, they're probably going to win both their search and destroys, and can they clutch up in a hard point or win the control? That's just, can they win map 1 or map 3? If they do, you're probably not going to beat them. So I'm going to go, I do think it'll be close. I think Minnesota clutches up in that map 5 search and destroy. I'm going to go 3-2 Minnesota to end the prediction part of today.
So let me ask you a quick question before we go to any type of power rankings, and we can kind of do a little bit of what you did on your video, the OE. Do you think that if Minnesota shifts focus, they haven't won a hard point. If you think, but they beat Dallas, like if they shift focus to their hard point rotations and reps, I mean, they're scrimming it, but if they shift their focus to how to be better, a little bit better in hard point, how to rotate better, how to hold spawns and stuff like that, like, and get the cutoffs and all that, and out rotate the other teams, whatever it is that they're missing, do you think that they may falter a little bit in their flawless search and destroy record that they have? Like, or do you think that they just, if they get better at hardpoint, they're all around just going to be a better team?
I don't think they have to change much of anything, to be honest. I think, again, you're playing the best team in the world with the best player in the world, and you're one team gun battle away from winning that first hardpoint on checkmate against Dallas. So, I mean, you could say, yeah, maybe give a little bit more time here, less time here, or whatever, but I just don't think everything happens so fast. If it's, I mean, it's Call of Duty timing, right? Like the age-old adage. You'll be staring at a place and you'll stare there for 5 seconds and you turn, and as soon as you turn, somebody pops out and kills you. That's just the way Call of Duty is. And there's no way that you can fix scenarios like that. I just think keep grinding, keep playing.
Yeah.
They're going to make those plays. There's no way that we're talking about attach we're talking about Priesta. Like, there's no way that they don't make those plays the majority of the time. So
Mm-hmm.
if you're Minnesota, just keep doing what you're doing. And it was Dallas against Hugh and Shotzi and Illy. Like,
I mean,
sometimes
but they also dropped 2 against the Thieves, right? They dropped 2
they
hard
did.
points against them as
Yeah.
well.
Yeah.
Like
Those, it's a little bit of a different story there. I don't know if they just weren't prepared or weren't quite ready or they were
yeah,
looking ahead, or I don't know what the story was there, because that's probably a matchup that you expect them to at least force a map 5, and if they get to a map 5, they probably win that search and destroy. So
those 2
who knows?
teams, to be honest, I think that's a good good competitive match is them versus the LA Thieves. I think that would be hard to predict if they played them again right now. I wouldn't say that the Thieves would just win that. I wouldn't say that the ROKKR would just win it. I would go off of if they go to a game 5, I do think the ROKKR can win. But what you've been saying about Kenny is where Kenny's shining so far is, he's top 3 search and destroy kill death ratio with 1.69. So, I liked how you did power rankings on your video where you kind of did like good, better, best. I thought that was really interesting in an interesting way. Me and you last year, we always did kind of like there's this clear top 4, which I don't know if that's the case anymore. There's a clear middle 4 and there's a clear bottom 4. And so we'll call it good, better, best. The good will be the bottom 4. The better will be the middle 4. And then the best will be the top 4. So right now, who do you have as your top 4 teams in the league? And if you can put them in order, put them in order.
Okay, so if we're talking about the top 3 or top 4, I think there's a definite top 3. I think after you get to the top 3, trying to figure out who's in that 4th spot is a little bit tricky. But up until they lost to Minnesota, I said, I am not moving Dallas no matter what until somebody beats Dallas.
Right.
Well, they got beat. And I know Atlanta also got beat, but it was on kickoff weekend and it didn't count for anything. And of course, we know what happened with Atlanta and Chicago. So in my mind, I can't put Chicago above Atlanta because they just played and got smoked and searched. They lost that 3-2. But when it comes to Dallas, they just lost to Minnesota and they didn't look good doing it. So my top 3, the only thing that I'm shaking up here is I'm actually putting Atlanta at 1. I'm moving Dallas to 2, and I have Chicago at 3. And then when you're talking about that 4th spot, the 4th spot is a toss-up between you have LA Thieves, you have Minnesota, you have Florida, you have Toronto. Those are the 4 teams that, for me, you could put anybody there in the top 4. But just based off of recent performance, and it might be a little bit of recency bias and a little bit prisoner of the moment,
Right.
but LA Thieves look super good this weekend. I have to put them above Minnesota because they just beat them, even though Minnesota has the more impressive victory between the two of them. Beating Dallas is a great accomplishment, but
Yeah.
4 and 5, I know that I'm not sticking to the 4, 4, and 4, but 4, I put LA Thieves ahead of Minnesota just because they won head to head. Then of the teams that are kind of the middle of the pack there, I have Minnesota at 5 just because of those teams. They have the most impressive victory. So my top 5: Atlanta, Dallas, Chicago, LA Thieves, Minnesota.
So I'm going to say the exact same order. I'm going to say Atlanta FaZe is number 1. And some people might be like, well, the Thieves haven't lost yet. But, who you play makes a difference. But I'm going to say Atlanta FaZe number 1. And I'm just going to move them up from where I had. Well, no, because I think I had it like Dallas, Optic, Atlanta. That was so hard to predict who was number 1 amongst those 3. But I'm going to say Atlanta FaZe number 1. I'm going to say Dallas Empire number 2. I'm going to say Optic Chicago number 3. I can't not put the LA Thieves number 4. There's just no way. And they easily, after this weekend, could go up more. But they beat Minnesota, and so I can't put Minnesota above them, like you said. I'm actually going to throw a curveball after I put Minnesota next, and I'm going to put Toronto above Florida. Florida's map count 1 and 3, Toronto's 3 and 1. The way they won, they looked really good. They didn't just win by getting lucky or playing an easy team. They won by doing the right things there, and they had some great gameplay and teamwork, and I expect actually to see more of that. Unfortunately, they play some very difficult teams in this upcoming week, so it's going to be interesting how that goes. Just like last year, I have teams like NYSL sitting there in the middle, Florida sitting there in the middle, kind of unpredictable. I would put the Seattle Surge up a lot higher this year than I had them last year, because they look like they have a lot of potential. Paris is down at the bottom, down there with them. That's tough for who the kind of those good teams are that are at the bottom of it. We just haven't had enough Call of Duty played. But in terms of the top power rankings, that would be my list. It would be Atlanta, Dallas, Chicago, Thieves, ROKKR, Ultra, and then Florida would be in seventh. And so Florida's got to show me something. Like and this is going to be their opportunity. It is not outside of, they got to beat lag in kind of a commanding fashion, in my opinion. And they got to beat Paris. I mean, if they lose to Paris, it'll be right that they're kind of seventh or eighth, in the league. And I'm not saying Paris is bad. They just have struggled against the teams that they've played against, and came close against lag, but lag pulled it out. And that's why, that's another one where it's going to be tough. So power rankings are hard. I'm wondering how everybody's power rankings are going to be. I'm interested in seeing other podcasts and commentators and all those kind of things. And I'm excited to hopefully see some Call of Duty this week. I think everyone's power is still out in Texas. It's come on for a little bit, but pro players have not been able to stream. It's kind of interesting that 80% of the league or 90% of the league moves to Texas. and part of the reason a lot of people, because there's a lot of content creators that live in Texas and they move there to get in better weather. And then Texas has a snowstorm that's literally only like 4 or 5 inches. But because they weren't really prepared for that infrastructure wise, they're doing these waves of power outages to keep. Yeah, it doesn't sound very fun. If you're, I'll say it for what it's worth. Crimsix mentioned after that last match that his door frame broke and the cold air was coming in he showed a picture of it. The cold air was coming in his room and he had like pillows and blankets stuffed around his door, and his door is right next to his desk. And when you're a Crimsix or a Clayster or a Scump, any of these veteran players, like, I mean, even a younger player, but I would imagine that especially as a veteran player, like, temperature affects your whole mindset. Like, it does throw you off. And of course, we saw Crim not perform as well as we're used to seeing him perform in that last match. And so hopefully these guys all get their power back. I couldn't keep track of who had power and who didn't have power, but hopefully they get their power back and we're able to see some competitive Call of Duty this weekend. I think the league will wait until the final moments to call it if they have to call it. And maybe they'll still do Friday and then they'll have to reschedule the matches that were going to be on Thursday. I mean, who knows how they'll figure that out. I would say I'm very thankful for the schedule. I'm thankful for all of the games of Call of Duty. I was, popping on YouTube today and seeing there was Challengers matches going on. And so there's just Call of Duty being played all week long, all over the place. Shout out to Tun. He made a recap about Challengers. And I know Shift and some of those guys are doing recaps and talking about the Challenger scene. I think like you, IKON, I'm not as familiar with it. I'm just seeing lots of roster trades, but I know that NYSL's academy team, that they've caught back-to-back wins and they're doing a good job with Saints on there. And so, GG's to those guys. Do you have any final thoughts or words before we end the podcast?
Just final thoughts. Again, I'm hoping that we get to see some more Call of Duty this weekend. If we don't, I don't know if that schedule just gets pushed to like Monday through Thursday. I mean, the entire schedule for the next forever is basically laid out. So we'll see what happens. Hopefully it comes back. Everything will be okay. But I'm just looking forward to some more Call of Duty. I think we're learning about these teams, just different things that we weren't quite sure of before. Right now, power rankings and predictions and things can be really tough because we just don't know who's where and how these teams are performing against others. And you bring in the online environment, and there's so many things that throw monkey wrenches into trying to make these predictions and power rankings. But it's fun to talk about. I look forward to watching some more Call of Duty and learning about a lot of these new rosters. I mean, so many of these rosters are are new from what we had last year. So let's just keep our fingers crossed so everything turns out well. Get to watch some more Call of Duty and enjoy another weekend of esports.
And we will catch you guys next week, same time, same place, hopefully with our co-host Ashley, and maybe we'll have a guest on for that week. We'll see how it goes. There might be matches being played that day, so we'll have to see what we do. But 7:30 Central, 8:30 Eastern, right here on the ROKKR YouTube channel for the rotation. Yes, sir.
I will say real quick, Minnesota plays Friday at 2 p.m. Central Time, and then they play again in the marquee matchup Sunday at 5 p.m. Central Time. So,
and you are co-streaming, right?
Yeah, there's a co-stream right here on Minnesota ROKKR's YouTube channel. So make sure you guys tune in. Ashley and I are there. We're breaking down in between matches, what happens, what went wrong on a map, what went right on a map, and doing all that sort of stuff. So if you're looking for a little bit more in-depth, detailed content that's ROKKR focused, you can find us there Friday at 2 p.m. Central and Sunday at 5 p.m. Central.
We'll see you guys this weekend.